tensions in the Middle East have reached another dangerous turning point. The occupied Palestinian territories have witnessed another week of heightened tensions, beginning in Jerusalem's Old City and spreading across the occupied West Bank. Israeli settlers have stormed Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque twice within a week. It began with the controversial storming of Al-Aqsa compound during Tisha B'Av, drawing widespread condemnation across the Arab and Muslim world. Days later, a deadly terror shooting in the West Bank village of Tal triggered sweeping Israeli military raids, a massive manhunt, deepening fears that the security situation is continuing to worsen. Since then, violence has spiraled across multiple West Bank towns with raids, arrests, road closure and fresh allegations of attacks, fueling fears of wider escalation. The latest violence comes just 3 months before Israel's general elections. Now we break down the sequence of events from Al-Aqsa to Tal and examine how the situation has rapidly worsened, bringing the region closer to another major flashpoint. The latest escalation began in Jerusalem, where more than 2,300 Israelis entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound during Tisha B'Av. Israeli police deployed heavily around the old city as groups entered the compound throughout the morning. The visit came during one of the holiest periods in the Jewish calendar, when many religious Jews visit the site referred as a Temple Mount. For Muslims, however, the compound is known as Al-Haram Al-Sharif and is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, Islam's third holiest site. Jordan, which serves as custodian of the Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem, condemned what it described as violations of the site's historic status quo. The Palestinian Authority and Hamas also criticized the visits, while several Arab and Muslim countries called for restraint. Israeli officials meanwhile said police were present to maintain public order and security. The visits took place under police protection, although long-standing arrangements governing prayer at the site remain a source of recurring political and religious tensions. The compound has frequently become a flashpoint in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with changes, real or perceived, to the status quo often triggering unrest. Just days after the events in Jerusalem, violence shifted to the occupied West Bank. Israeli authorities said a deadly shooting near the Palestinian village of Tal, southwest of Nablus, killed 2 Israeli civilians. Israeli officials described the incident as a terrorist attack and launched a large-scale manhunt for those responsible. Palestinian residents, however, described a different sequence of events. According to local residents and Palestinian officials, armed Israeli settlers entered Tal following the shooting, leading to clashes that spread through parts of the village. Witnesses reported vehicles being damaged, homes attacked, and confrontations between settlers and Palestinian residents. Israeli authorities said security forces were deployed to restore order and pursue the attackers responsible for the shooting. In the aftermath of the shooting, Israeli forces significantly expanded military operations across several West Bank towns. Israeli troops carried out raids in areas including Nablus, Jenin, Tulkaram and nearby communities. According to the Israeli military, the operations were aimed at locating suspects connected to the attack, confiscating weapons and dismantling militant infrastructure. Palestinian officials and residents reported numerous arrests, road closures, checkpoints and restrictions of movement during the operations. Rights organizations have repeatedly expressed concern that such restrictions affect daily life for civilians, including access to healthcare, education and employment. Israel says the measures are necessary to prevent further attacks and ensure public safety. Alongside the military raids, reports of settler violence also increased. Palestinian officials and residents reported attacks on several villages, alleging that homes, vehicles and agricultural property were damaged. Some residents also reported arson attacks and damage to religious sites. Israeli police said they were investigating reported incidents, while Israeli leaders have previously condemned acts of violence carried out by extremist settlers. Human rights organizations have long documented an increase in attacks involving Israeli settlers in parts of the occupied West Bank. The United Nations has also warned that settler-related violence has risen sharply in recent years, contributing to growing instability across the territory. Many Palestinian residents say they fear repeated attacks on their communities, while Israeli officials argue that security threats against Israeli civilians have also intensified. Now, the question arises, who does the West Bank really belong to? Analysts say these developments are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader cycle of violence that has intensified over recent years. Jerusalem's holy sites remain among the most sensitive religious locations in the world. Events at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound frequently resonate far beyond the city, influencing tensions across the occupied West Bank and Gaza. At the same time, repeated militant attacks targeting Israelis, expanding Israeli military operations, and settler-Palestinian confrontations have all contributed to a worsening security environment. Each major incident often triggers retaliatory measures, further military deployments, protests, and additional violence, making de-escalation increasingly difficult. International organizations, including the United Nations, have repeatedly called on all sides to avoid actions that could inflame tensions and to protect civilians. Regional governments have similarly urged restraint while warning against steps that could further destabilize Jerusalem and the occupied Palestinian territories. The events of the past week illustrate how quickly localized incidents can evolve into a broader regional tensions. The controversy surrounding visits to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, the deadly shooting near Tal, the subsequent Israeli military operations, and reports of renewed settler violence have once again placed the occupied West Bank at the center of international attention. With both Israelis and Palestinians mourning lives lost and accusing the other side of escalating the conflict, concerns remain high that without meaningful efforts to reduce tensions, further violence could follow in the days ahead.